that's another thing that you really have to tip your hat to them for, much like
most brands would have said, hey, we're at $60,000 on our, kind of signature watch. How do we get to 80 on our next one?
Well, or you end up with the unfortunate alternative solution, which is like a baby Benz, right?
Right.
Where it's like, it's
good
not,
point. They've managed to introduce watches at significantly lower prices without watering down the drink.
Hey, did you like that I get an actually relevant and accurate automotive reference?
The baby Benz.
There you go. Thank you. I was embarrassed.
It's like a 20-year-old analogy or metaphor, but sure. I guess I don't know the difference between an analogy and a metaphor, so. This is Openwork, a look inside the watch industry, a podcast from Collective Horology. I'm Gabe Riley, co-founder of Collective.
I'm Asher Rapkin, co-founder of Collective.
And I'm Jeff.
Huh.
That's weird.
Yeah. Okay. Look, well, as I'm sure you know, Collective is an authorized retailer of many independent brands who are exhibiting this week in Geneva at Geneva Watch Days. We're recording live from the Hotel East West, where the Alternative Horological Alliance is exhibiting. So we've got Fears, Ming, Fleming, Messina Lab is downstairs with Unimatic as well. They've been nice enough to furnish us with a private room to record, so big thanks to those guys. The purpose of today's podcast is, of course, to talk about our favorite watches from Geneva Watch Days. And oh my, have we seen lots of watches. We're each going to pick 3 watches, and we'll tell you why we love them. And of course, links to all of those watches will be in the show notes at collectivehorology.com/blog. But maybe the most important thing we should do before we talk watches is introduce Jeff, who's joining us today. Jeff is none other than Jeff Souter. He is the director of sales at Collective. He's been with us for over a year, and this is his first appearance on Openwork. So, Jeff, welcome to Openwork.
Thanks for having me.
Now, is this your first time at Geneva Watch Days?
It sure is. It's been a real blast seeing everything that's going on out here.
And you've been to Geneva before for work. You've been in the watch industry for a while, but this is your first time in Geneva at Geneva Watch Days. What are your impressions of this show?
When I've been here before, it's been very formal. It's felt very buttoned up. It's felt very orchestrated and just deeply organized. And what I found here is that there's a chaotic beauty in the madness of both casual and incredible watchmaking.
Chaotic beauty. That sounds like my life.
No, that describes it, and it probably describes some of the watches we're going to talk about. Now, we thought it would be good to have you on the show today because you do nothing but talk watches all day long. Of course, many of our customers, all of our customers know you and talk to you about watches all the time. So your perspective on what you saw today is super valuable to us and to everyone listening. So why don't we just talk about some watches? Asher, we're going to start with you. Each of us will pick 3 watches and we'll sort of go around here one by one. So Asher, what is your first pick?
Well, I'm going to start with a brand we don't carry, but one that we have worked with in the past and that we adore, and one that, I mean, Jeff, you tell me how you feel, but kind of gets into your brain and never really leaves once you experience it, which is Urwerk.
I'm having sleepless nights over this one.
Yeah, that's kind of what they do to you. So
Jeff will, after visiting Urwerk, Jeff will never be the same.
Well, that's kind of how it works with Urwerk, because if you don't get it, like if you're a listener who's listening to us right now going, really? I would just encourage you to make your way in any way that you can to go hands-on with as many Urwerks as you can, because they are sculptures, they are highly conceptual, and they are deeply meaningful watches. And then if you take all that away, they're just badass.
The thing I'll recommend on that is we did a collaboration years back with Urwerk, and we did a video for that collaboration, which wasn't so much about the watch, but it was more about Urwerk's philosophical approach to watchmaking and watch design. We interviewed Martin Fry, one of the co-founders of Urwerk. And if you're just curious to get on the wavelength and learn about the brand, check out that video. We'll put it in the show notes.
So I'll try to make this brief, but one of my top 3 watches from this trip was the UR150 Blue.
Nice.
Yeah, this is a new release as of 2 days ago or so. It is an evolution of a watch that debuted last year at Watchtime New York, the UR150 Scorpion. Look, This to me is a distillation of what makes Urwerk. It is in my personal opinion, it is the best watch they have ever made, and that's saying a lot because I love a lot of their watches. But ultimately, the 150 Blue distills their design language, distills their technology, and distills their aesthetic overall into a very clear and very ownable watch that also, I should add, has been slightly tweaked from the original case design to make it even more ergonomic. Because that's the thing. I think
I tried the two watches on back to back when we were at Urwerk, and the first Scorpion, I love the original. I love it's a great watch.
Yeah.
But I noticed, I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist, and I noticed that where the strap integrates with the case, it flared off my wrist a little bit. Then I put the blue version on the new release, and it just hugs the wrist. And they explained they made a couple of tweaks to the case and where the case and the strap integrate. And this thing it's got a very organic shape, which is cool, but it just gels on your wrist.
Yeah, it's a beauty to wear. And I think that's it. A lot of people look at Urwerks in general and it can be intimidating. You think maybe they're not going to fit on my wrist. Maybe it's going to look, it's kind of like a horological machine from MB&F where it's clearly a statement piece, but you gotta have the confidence and the wherewithal to wear these things. I don't think that's true about the 150. The 150 is a watch that you wear every day. It's that comfortable. It's that reasonable. It has a screw down crown. I believe it's one of the few Urwerks that actually has that. So it checks every box for me. It's 118,000 USD. So, it's not at the top of the Urwerk range. It's sort of in the middle, but it really does deliver on absolutely everything I think somebody would ever want from that brand. Absolutely love it. Slam dunk. Chef's kiss.
Yeah, it's the Urwerk that threads the needle.
Jeff, hit me with a choice.
Well, you kind of took mine, so I'm going to have to think of another one now.
Think fast.
I think I'm going to go with first of all, I'm going to go with the Carl Succi Belvedere. And just in general, Carl Succi makes some really interesting watches. They're kind of like 50-50 between technical prowess and beautiful geometric design. And one thing that I find interesting about them is they're just super hypnotic. And when I saw the Belvedere, I saw this watch that has this really interesting date feature in the middle of it. You just have to kind of see it. It's not
kind of like a jump date.
It's like a jump date, but then the date is split up into two separate numbers. Like it's really cool, and the date floats around the inside of the dial. But it does that on this geometric linear pattern that changes. So every time you look at the watch, it's just a little bit different, which I think is really, really cool. Usually the watches that I see either focus a lot on the design or a lot on the technology. It's weird to find one that goes right down the middle of those two things. And you can look at this either way and find it to be absolutely perfect.
I love that watch because it plays in a product category that we all know and understand well, which is kind of the stainless steel sports watch. But it manages to do it in a way that feels completely fresh and different, because of the way they handle the date and the dial design and finishing and the case construction and the case lines and all these sorts of things. It's this watch that I find very satisfying and rewarding. There's always like details to study and uncover. There are Easter eggs in the design of the watch and even the movement. It's a tremendous watch, and I guess we should probably maybe speak a little bit out of turn here and let people know Carl Succi is a brand that we are adding to Collective. So the Belvedere, along with Carl Succi's full collection, will be available at Collective. We're proud to open them and represent them, and the Belvedere is one of many watches that they make, but in some ways it is the quintessential watch they make. It's probably the most recognizable, but it's also in just as with any of their others, like I said, just extremely thoughtful and satisfying, and a very fresh take on a very well-trodden category.
Also, not for nothing, lovely people.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing.
And I think that's the primary reason we wanted to work with them. So I will do my first take, and it's a brand that we don't work with, and that's Debitune. I had never actually handled a Debitune.
Really?
Before. Yeah, I've read about the brand. I've seen the watches in person, but I've never had the chance to handle them. I've never had the chance to put one on my wrist. I've never had, let alone, gosh, what did we probably looked at 8 watches or something like that. Yeah. I mean, they're really cool, and they're one of the, there's that old saying, like, never meet your heroes, right? These watches, they're in some ways they're so hyped. I mean, this is one of the hottest independent brands out there, just purely in terms of hype alone around the brand, but the product lives up to the hype. The watch that really, and this is so unusual, but the one that really spoke to me, it's a novelty. I think they just released it. It's a DB25, so it's a time-only watch. It's DB25 or the Stradivarius, but it's a novelty they just released with this beautiful burgundy dial.
I think it's anodized. And then
it's like an anodized color. But
if I'm not mistaken, because I know the blue version of that is an anodized titanium.
Interesting.
So I wonder if it's a similar process on that one.
Yeah, I don't think we found out what exactly the process is, but like one, leaning toward a dressier watch, not my thing. Leaning toward a burgundy watch, very out of character for me. But there is just a soul to this object. You know, in a lot of ways, Debitune is kind of like this cousin to Urwerk, where it's like if you put very classical watchmaking, you know, a lot of the cues of Abraham Louis Breguet and classical watches in a blender with in these very space age watches from Urwerk, you get a Debitune almost. You get this thing that looks almost like this futuristic object with very classical lines and design and really impressive finishing and engineering and you know, mechanical design. But yeah, I can't get that watch out of my head. There is that sort of space age quality to it, but yet a warmth and a soul to it that I just found like, it's a word I wouldn't really normally use, but like really enchanting.
Yeah, look, I think the thing about hype that can really be unfortunate is that when a brand is surrounded by that kind of energy, I think sometimes it actually clouds one's ability to look at the actual art in the watch because, you know, you're like, you think, oh, I can never get that, or like, oh, like, you know, this is too out of my reach or whatever. And that prevents somebody from actually sitting down and looking at the watch and evaluating it as the artistic object that it is. And when you sit down and you see some of these pieces, you know, you really start to appreciate that, similar to brands like Urwerk, like MB&F, you know, to a certain degree, like FP Journe even, they had a long life before the larger watch community really paid attention to them.
Yeah.
And you see that when you look at this, because these brands don't come from nowhere, you know, they don't just appear out of thin air. This is someone
manifesting a hype object.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, the reason I say that is like, that does happen in fashion, you know, but that doesn't really happen here because these brands, they were toiling away. I mean, Debitune as a brand 10 years ago, like that was like MB&F, like Urwerk, like Journe 20 years ago, not even 15. You know, these were brands that had to be sold. You know, the people who invested in them, the early retailers, etc., they really made an effort to help open people's eyes to this because they are exceptional watches, not because they are hyped, because they are beautiful. They have their own idea and they execute on it flawlessly. And when you sit down with them, you're reminded of that. And to a certain degree, maybe it's not hype, maybe it's just deserved attention.
Yeah, I'd love to do a podcast at some point on like how to become a hype watch,
or just the business of hype in general, because like, you know,
interesting.
It does change.
Yeah.
It changes people.
No, but the business and psychology of hype products.
100%.
Yeah.
It changes the way you look at watches themselves too.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, the collector gaze, if you will, changes for those sorts of product. Pivoting over to me. It's my turn now.
Second choice, Asher, hit it.
Okay, so here's a watch that was profoundly successful for us and our dear friends and partners at Ming, but also a watch that I had not seen the final actual production version of until we had sold out of our allocation, which is the Iris, the brand new monopusher chronograph from Ming. It's, you know, when we first heard about this watch, we were at Watches and Wonders this year. Gabe and I sat down with Ming and they showed us the case for this watch. It had a prototype dial in it that's nothing like the one that actually went into production. It might even, I mean, it was literally just essentially black.
Yes.
And I remember putting it on my wrist and just going, whoa, because the dimensions of this watch are very different than what we're used to. I wear a minimalist very often throughout the week, and I'm very used to that case dimension, that size, that 38 millimeter, you know, Ming case. This is 2 millimeters bigger. The wrist presence is significant, especially due to the triple lugs, but not overwhelming. It's
No, I think it's funny. Ming claims like it wears smaller than a 40 millimeter watch. It, in my opinion, from wearing it and photographing and all that stuff, like it wears exactly like a 40 millimeter watch.
Yeah.
Which I think is still impressive given that lug design.
But what I really like about it, and this I think is part of like really the essence of what makes Ming, is that, you know, it is a mono pusher chronograph, of course, but like everything, every detail on it has been thought through, including, you know, how the totalizer works as a disc, you know, of course, the fact that the dial is unphotographable because it's in constant flux, the completely new case design, the wearability of it. And because, again, Ming thinks about things holistically, even though the dimensions are different, the lugs are still 20 millimeters, making it wearable and delivered actually also on the universal bracelet. So, you know, Ming is one of those brands that for me, it's like when I see something that's awesome from them, it makes me like, I want to like giggle. Like it's just awesome because the brand just continues to elbow its way into new territories and find these creative solutions. And the Iris demonstrates that not only in you know, how well it sold in the first release here, but also on the wrist, it delivers that when you put it on. So, you know, I'm sure we will see more in this case because that's just how the company operates down the road. But a very strong first release from them that really delivered on it when I got my hands on it.
Yeah, a really wild watch. If you've ordered one and you've got one on the way, get excited. It's just so cool. And if you have the chance to check one out, whether it's at Watch Time, we'll be there with Ming next month, or at a collector event or meetup, or if your friend has one, run, don't walk to check out this watch. It's so cool.
Yeah, I guess I have one here. So I have two loves from this show, and we already talked about one, which is the Scorpion from Urwerk, but the second one is the Shapiro.
Yeah.
So
all right, I'm glad you're bringing this one up. Hey, it's Gabe. Unfortunately, I have to jump in here because this next watch is still under embargo, so we actually can't share the details. It's a real bummer, but don't worry, we're going to have all the details very soon. Back to the show. I'm glad you got to check it out. We're, of course, you know, Asher and I are in the LA area, so we get to see Josh with some regularity. So we often forget like what a treat it is, and we take for granted the ability to see his watches on a regular basis.
Yeah, and this watch was also just like from an emotional standpoint for me, like really special because this is one of the few watches that I had the privilege of seeing from drawing all the way through to execution, which was years, by the way. He started talking to me about this over a year and a half ago, and it's just cool to see that coming to life.
Years. I mean,
man.
at least 1 year and some months.
Years.
At minimum, the toil of the watchmaker, you'll never understand.
He's been finishing each part for years.
Yeah. All right. Well,
all right, cool.
So speaking of watches we carry. Now this is when I shill shamelessly. No, this actually isn't a shill. This is a watch that I didn't really get until I saw it in person. And it was actually seeing a different watch that put this watch into focus for me. And this is one of the biggest releases of the show in terms of, you know, notoriety and buzz, which was the Chapek Antarctique Rattrapant RUR. So if you're familiar with Chapek and the Antarctique, they've done a Rattrapant version of that watch in the past. So that's obviously a split-second chronograph. This one's called the RUR, and it's kind of colloquially known as the robot. And the reason why is at the cardinal point of the dial at 12 o'clock, there is a robot on the dial, the head of a robot. And when you engage the chronograph, so when you start, stop, and reset the chronograph, the eyes of the robot change color. Now, this is a very quirky watch. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, they don't just change color. I mean, they specifically indicate the function of the watch.
Well, exactly. They change color to indicate the function of the watch. So there's a purpose that they serve. And there's a connection between the brand of Chapek and the story of this robot character. It's a very involved story. It's on collectivehorology.com/blog if you want to learn about the origins of this. But to be honest, like I didn't really get this watch. And then I saw it in person. I was like, okay, this really works. Like this is cool because they didn't just put a robot on the dial. They also invented this whole like numerical system and language for the time telling of the watch. So the indices in the watch, both for the outer ring of the dial and then the subdials, have this sort of numerical robot language that they use, which is really cool and really works aesthetically. But what made this watch for me was we left the Chapek meeting and we went down the hall to see another brand. And as we were waiting to get into this other meeting, one of the team members from Chapek was walking down the hall, and I just started chit-chatting with him, as you do between meetings out at Geneva Watch Days. And I just asked him, hey, what are you wearing? And he shows me he's wearing the original Rattrapant.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that watch, and I'm like, the robot's missing. And instantly I was like, oh my gosh, I never like in some ways, like, because this Rattrapant it's an upside down Rattrapant, it's skeletonized, the chronograph is exposed on the dial. In the original version of this watch, there was basically empty space on the top half of the dial, was skeletonized and opened, and the sub registers are at the bottom of the dial. So when you add the robot, it not only adds the functionality to tell you at which stage the chronograph is engaged, but it also kind of ties, it's like the dude's rug. It ties the whole room together. And it's like, I didn't realize how much it really works. And I think for me, improves the watch until I saw the absence.
All the dude wanted was his rug back.
All the dude wanted was his rug back. So,
it's,
you got to see these things in person.
Well, don't forget who introduced us to the watch as well.
Yeah. Yes. There's this like creepy AI robot in Chapek's hotel suite. It was endearing, and there's probably videos of it on social media. But let's just say the robot in the watch is really the star of the show.
Yeah, and I'll also go back and just say, similar to Josh Shapiro's, this is another project that we have had the privilege of seeing develop over time. And one of the wonderful things about Chapek is that Xavier de Roquemorel, the CEO of the company, is very transparent and he's transparent with the public, but he's extremely transparent with his partners. And he will regularly show you extremely early ideas and prototypes to get your opinion, which, by the way, he really is appreciative of and takes to heart. And I can't even remember the first time we heard about the robot. I mean, 2 years ago, maybe year and a half. Maybe more
years ago.
At least years of robotics
in a few months.
But seriously, I mean, like years. And
yes,
we've seen sketches.
It was
seen drawings.
2 years ago.
Yeah, and it's another one where I'm again like really. It's exciting because I feel like I've known about this for a long time, but the way that I pictured it in my head, even from the drawings, isn't really the way it came to life. Which is a good reminder, by the way. Just in general, that like looking at a render or looking at an early stage drawing can't always convey like the power of a watch. I mean, I know that for a fact as it relates to the iris, certainly, like the render of the iris that we saw, when we ordered our allocation of it is nothing compared to the actual like power of it when you held it in your hand. So like so many things, it's exciting to see it because the devil's in the details, like when you loop the head of the robot, and you see how absolutely gorgeous it is, the facets, the finishing, and then you apply that to the conceptual idea, you get everything that you want, or at least everything I want from watchmaking, which is good storytelling with exceptional artistic value, and it delivers.
Yeah, it's a really cool creation. With your final pick.
Yes. So, new watch that came out from our friends at Fears. The first time I saw this watch was on Dan Varney's phone at Intersect Los Angeles when
commercial director of Fears,
who very kindly gave me a sneak preview of this watch. I did not know it was coming. It's part of what they're calling the Trinity. These are their new generation releases across 3 product families at Fears. This watch is called the Endurance Spec, and it sits inside the Redcliffe 39.5 case, but that's about as much as it shares with the original version of those watches. It has a bead blasted mid case, DLC bezel, and DLC case back on this really cool woven rubber strap with DLC deployment clasp. The thing that's cool about it, and I mean, look, I love watches like this. It's the same thing that attracts me to like that cool Chopard Alpine Eagle that we saw. I'm talking about the one that's a ceramicized titanium high beat. I'm really attracted to these kind of like stealthy, kind of under the radar high end watches that really, they really kind of get me. But what I think is remarkable about this one in particular And I feel this way. I was talking to Jeff about this on the walk over here. It reminds me a lot of another designer who I really respect and like, Christian Knoop of IWC. The reason why is one of the best things about both IWC and Fears is that they have incredibly well-defined design languages. You know, like you can recognize a Fears, you can certainly recognize an IWC, and that's because they have a very strict adherence to the way that they do things. And that's really cool, but it can be also quite constricting. You know, you can see somebody feeling trapped in that. And I remember talking to Christian about this at one point because, you know, like if you think about like a Pilot watch or a Portofino, for example, from IWC, it kind of is what it is, you know, and you can't push boundaries on it unless you're Christian. And Christian has found ways to like squeeze new life out of those watches and to really, you know, force his way into new creative territories. And that is exactly what Nicholas did with this watch. This watch pushes Fears' design language without changing it into a new category. I don't know if I'd call this I guess it's a sports watch. It's a sports watch. Would you say?
No, it's not a sports. So I did I actually did our Fears meeting.
So how would you describe
I sat down
it?
with Nicholas. He gave me the full Nicholas Bowman Scargill spiel. He and I also recorded a video, which I'm going to post on this watch going into all the details. So what he said is, look, Fears already makes some sports watches. Like the Red Cliff is a sports watch.
Sure.
This is a tool watch.
Okay. All right.
The reason why is like, I think you're attracted to it because of the design. What attracts me to this watch are some of the technological and engineering differences between this and a standard Fear. So couple things. One thing I learned is that Endurance Spec, or ES for short is what they're calling this, is now a line of watches within Fears. So the same way like Mercedes has AMG, or the same way Audi has S-Line or RS cars, ES, Endurance Specification, can be applied to any Fears model going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, right, you could have a Brunswick 40 ES. I don't know if they're planning on that, or like specifically, I don't know anything. I haven't seen a roadmap on there.
No, but I get the concept of what you're describing.
Maybe there could be a Fears Arnos ES, right? But
that's wild.
You get the idea. And so, well, what does that mean? It means it's built to a different and a much more rugged standard. So you liked the fact that it was a bead blasted or frosted finish across the case. The reason they've done that is because that helped them harden the case. So this case is hardened to 2000 Vickers, which is many times harder than both stainless steel itself or even titanium. They're also using DLC to further harden the bezel, the crown, and the case back. On the dial, the lume glows like a torch. This thing doesn't use applied.
Right.
It's Lumicast. These are like... lume is mounted onto the dial itself, you know, basically
similar, as I recall, to what we did with the C2.
Yeah, or like if you're familiar with the Black Bay Pro, right? Similar, you know. So the indices are entirely made of lume, which is so all of this, even the way they treated and finished the dial, everything about this watch has been sort of reconceived. It's a Red Cliff in that it shares those proportions and generally that case and whatever, but it's made to an entirely different standard, and this represents a new family of watches from Fears, which I think is just kind of cool and exciting to see where they take it.
Yeah, it's a great watch.
Jeff, your final choice. This is it. Moment of truth.
I want to set the stage a little bit before I bring this one up. So this is towards the end of the day. I think it was our last meeting. What did we have? 14 meetings that day? 15 meetings? Something like that?
I don't even know what day it is, man.
I was totally jet lagged. I had seen so many watches at this point, and we had this one more thing to get done. And we sit down for the meeting, and in walks these two very well-dressed, well-put-together gentlemen, and they put a case down on the table. And they open it up, and I look at these watches, and it's by Holt & Rich.
Yeah, man.
One of the things the first thing that I saw is I looked at the watch and on somebody else's wrist, and I said, on one of their wrists, and I said, that's a really cool watch. I want to see it. And it's got these wonderful lugs on it that look great from a distance. Couldn't really see the detail. And then they started going into the story of how the watches came to be. And we heard this story about somebody that believes so deeply in what they were doing, and what they were doing is right and meaningful and had purpose, that they were willing to give up basically everything to make it happen.
Yep.
And this was a rather long story, but I was sitting on the edge of my seat for the entire time. And by the time I picked up the first watch, I was deeply into the gravity well of this brand. And where I found myself was holding a watch that looked like a celebration of Art Nouveau. And what I mean by that is when you looked at the dial, it had this beautiful tarnished patinaed dial
Yeah.
with layered gold on top of it. It had these stunning articulated lugs that were, you could see them from the side. They just looked absolutely beautiful, way over the top, yet also totally fitting into the design. It fit perfectly on the wrist, and it looked like a perfect material object that reflected the philosophies of the guy sitting on the other side of that table. And I absolutely fell in love with the brand in that moment and everything that he made.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been following Holt and Rich for years because anyone, and by the way, like, do yourself a favor if you're unfamiliar with this brand and like just stop listening to this and go check it out, because I've looked at videos about this brand. I've talked to friends and collectors about the brand, but I've never actually seen one. And the complexity of the case design is impossible to describe. It is impossible to explain, or I suppose it is possible, but it is wholly underserving the actual execution of the watch. It is astounding. And we were looking at the ornament line and some of the entry level pieces there, which are incredibly reasonable. They're, mid $5,000-ish, but they look the business, and they carry the soul of the intent with it. I mean, it's very clear. You put your finger on this, Jeff. These are intentional watches, deeply intentional watches. And you also can see not just the passion and the creativity and the inspiration in those watches. You can also see what the potential is. This is a relatively young man who owns the brand. He's in mid-30s, I believe.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah. And, we saw his first in-house caliber, which
that was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
unreal.
Well, it's unreal for a couple of reasons. First of all, you look at it and you're like, you're like, okay, like the design of this movement.
It's an Art Nouveau watch movement.
It is. And like one of the things that we've talked about in the past is, and anyone who's ever talked to me about this is going to roll their eyes. I always say this, but it's true, is that watches to me, because they're living and they're breathing, I like seeing implied motion and intent and movement design and the architecture of the movement. So, some movements are designed to showcase finishing. Some movements are designed for technical purposes. Some movements are all of the above and create, and emphasize the idea both through the technical and the aesthetic execution of the movement. This does that. You can like it, you can not like it, like whatever. But the bottom line is, it's the intentionality is there, and you see it, and you can see if this is what he's doing now. And you said this to me, Gabe. If this is what he's doing now, imagine what he's going to do, in 10, 15 years. I mean, that's how we feel about Josh. It's like, this is what Josh is doing now, 15 years, 16 years into being a watchmaker. You imagine what we're going to see from Shapiro when he's in his 40s, 50s, 60s, etc.
This is the triple threat. The watchmaking is absolutely there. A clear creative point of view and design philosophy is there. I'm looking at those watches and I'm thinking back to our meetings with Ming, with Urwerk, with Debitoon. These are brands that have very clear and distinct design codes. This is a brand that has a very clear and distinct design code. And then, Jeff, you're right. The third leg of the stool is the story of this brand and the watchmaker. It's a Dutch brand, so you can only imagine. We know how rare it is to be a Dutch watch brand or any watch brand outside of Switzerland, and to do something unique and to be able to put your own stamp on things. It's a remarkable brand. The watches are deeply, deeply beautiful. And because this brand is a triple threat, this is one of the only instances. Look, we came to Geneva Watch Days not just to talk to brands we already work with, but to find additional brands to work with.
Yep.
And some of those conversations are literally take years. We added another brand to our roster at Geneva Watch Days, which is a brand we've been talking to for like nearly 5 years. And we're going
5 years,
not just a year and a half, literally 5 years. And we'll announce them when we're ready to do all that. And we're proud of that.
Will that be in 5 years?
No, that'll be soon.
Okay.
But this was one of those meetings where Asher just looked at me and he goes, "I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of school here," turned to the watchmaker and said, we want to represent this brand. So
Which,
Holton
for the
Rich
record, by the way, is like not a thing that we do.
That's never happened before. No. Usually we see things, we tell people, what we think about the watches, how much we like them, and, we're going to follow up and be in a standard corporate meeting stuff. But Asher jumped up, stuck out his hand, and we all shaked hands on the spot. So Holton Riches is a brand that is coming to Collective, and my God, this is one of those rare things. Watch it. There's no watch that's for everyone, right? There are things that I love that Asher's like, or Jeff is really into, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it, but it's not for me. I think we all fell deeply in love. I can't wait to bring these watches in and of course share more with all of you guys about them.
I'm buying one for myself, straight up. It's awesome.
I can't wait.
Bring it home, Gabe.
Bring it home. Final pick. Again, this is a brand we carry, but this is another watch that got a lot of attention at Geneva Watch Days, one of the bells of the ball, as it were, and it's the Singer Reimagined Caballero.
Oh, yeah.
This is a freaking cool watch on so many levels. It's both a deeply unusual Singer, but also right at home. So this is Singer's really first time-only watch. I think we've
asterisk.
We've chatted about that in the past. What's most interesting about it, however, is it has their own proprietary movement, and it uses a really interesting approach to achieving constant force. The watch has 4 barrels, not 1, not 2, but 4. I just did a video today we were at Singer. I did a video kind of breaking down how those 4 barrels work together specifically to achieve constant force to the gear train.
There's the asterisk.
The escapement of the watch. It's also obviously a haute horology movement. It's beautiful in its design. It's finished to an incredibly high standard. And I got to tell you though, so it's the first time only watch. It's got this insane proprietary movement. So this is Singer's at first technically in-house movement. They've used other movements in the past, always finished at a high standard and very interesting. This is obviously those things too. But they introduced a new dial color with this one.
Yeah.
They have their signature black dial, their Empire Green, which they had launched with the Heritage chronograph earlier this year. By the way, the Empire Green, the green is really inspired by Singer vehicle design. I had a chance with Marco Borrachino, who's the founder of Singer Reimagined, the watch division of the company, to visit Singer vehicle design. And you wouldn't believe how many green cars are currently in production or being worked on at Singer vehicle design. Green may have had its moment in watches, but man, is it having its moment in the Porsche, or at least the Singer wing of the Porsche community. But then there is a new dial color, petrol blue. Mm-hmm. And wow, I did my best to get some photos and videos of this, which will be on the site along with the video I talked about. But this is just, I don't know how to describe it other than a very sexy blue. It's difficult to photograph in video, but it is, I don't know, a lustrous blue. It's tell it, girl. What a blue. And by the way, I generally don't like blue. I'd rather wear a black or a green or a white dial, but there is something about this blue.
You know what else is cool about this watch? Aside from its wearability, the technicality of it, the aesthetics of it, the Caliber 4, so the proprietary movement, is modular, which means that this watch is the first chapter in a whole range of potential options in the future. And I don't think those are coming anytime like immediately. And, we didn't get any insight into like what future complications could look like. But what you're really seeing here is not just a beautiful, and refined watch. And holding it, by the way, it revealed other details too. The classic interior coin edge bezel that we see on the inside is also engraved on the exterior of the bezel, which I had not really noticed until I held it.
Yeah.
It was very subtle, and it's
There's
in the photographs.
Consistency in the knurling of the crown as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's these are the things that like you see, but they're difficult to sometimes register until you physically hold it.
It's also like a tonneau shape, a case shape that looks more to the eye at first, like a regular, ordinary case. It's
the geometry of the case
considered from a design standpoint.
100%. So this is an important watch for the brand. It's going to be, I think, we believe in them. We carried them now for years. But in all seriousness,
it's been about a year and a half, man. But sure, years.
No, but in all seriousness, the reason we followed them, and you remember the first time that we met with them, we were like, we got to carry these guys.
Yeah.
And we met with them for subsequently 3 more watch shows before you and I finally pulled the trigger on it. And
the thing that put us over the top was the dive track.
It was, but my point is this just solidifies my belief in the brand. Not that I needed that, but like it just shows that like these are the kinds of people that I want to invest in, because you see that they're able, and again, just like we talked about with Fears, like we talked about with all these other brands, they constantly are pushing in new directions, and they're constantly saying, because you look at this watch, it looks like a Singer. But
yeah,
but if you roll the clock back and you think about like the original Track 1, which is where I first saw Singer, I remember the Hodinkee article in 2017 and seeing that and going, what even is that? And then you look at that, comparing it to the release of the Caballero, the journey of this brand in a relatively short period of time is extraordinary, and he's just getting started, Marco, with this line. So when you look at it from the Caballero to the Fly Track to the Dive Track to the Track 1 to the 1969 collection, this is a really robust and exceptionally broad collection of watches.
Well, this is the thing. Singer has been on an absolute heater for the last 2 years, because the first 5 years of the brand were really defined by the Track 1 and the Fly Track, both powered by Agengraph movements and, similar in their overall philosophy and things like that. And they kind of, I think, in a lot of the minds of a lot of collectors and media and things like that, became the unusual chronograph brand, and more known for the Agengraph and a particular case shape and all that kind of stuff. And there are many versions of those watches. But think about the last 2 years. You had the 1969 collection. You had the Dive Track. You had the Heritage Chronograph. And now you've got this, the Caballero. The brand has broken out of the mold from which they began in a serious way. And it is just like new collection, new approach to watchmaking, just one after the other. And so this is a brand that I think a lot of people have pigeonholed in their minds in one space or one corner of independent watchmaking, and is worth taking another look at.
Yeah, and not for nothing. I mean, it's just a couple $100 over 25 grand and a US, and that is remarkable as well, because for people who have admired Singer for a long time, the Heritage Chronograph gave people an opportunity at a much lower price point than the previous entry. This sits very comfortably in that $20,000 range, and not to dismiss $20,000 as an immaterial sum, it's a tremendous amount of money, but if you really like this and you were looking at Track 1 for $60,000-$70,000, this offers no cuts around the corner. I mean, this is
as compelling horologically.
Exactly. So that's another thing that you really have to tip your hat to them for. Much like
most brands would have said, "Hey, we're at $60,000 on our kind of signature watch. How do we get to 80 on our next one?"
Well, or you end up with the unfortunate alternative solution, which is like a baby Benz, right?
Right.
Where it's like,
it's not. Point. They've managed to introduce watches at significantly lower prices without watering down the drink.
Hey, did you like that I get an actually relevant and accurate automotive reference?
The baby Benz.
There you go. Thank you. I was embarrassed.
It's like a 20-year-old analogy or metaphor, but sure. I guess I don't know the difference between an analogy and a metaphor. So,
all right. I think this is a good place to call it.
All right. Yeah, we are delirious at the end of Geneva Watch Days, but man, some cool watches. And like we said on the last podcast, this week has been defined by creativity. The highlights of this show are defined by not just being creative, but having a very clear and distinctive point of view. They march to the beat of their own drummer. And so whether it's the Caballero or an Urwerk or a Holthenriches or whatever it might be, there's certainly something to sort of wow and amaze everyone and speak to your soul. So as we wrap up and head out of here, I just get more and more excited for Watches and Wonders to do this all over again. When we're off in our own little corner of the world doing what we do, we obviously don't get exposed to this many watches at one point. But when you come back here and you spend your time with watches, we remember what it's all about. It's not about the people, Asher. Whoever says it's about the people is wrong. It's about the watches. People come and go.
Are you okay?
No, I'm unwell. The jet lag has finally gotten to me. All right, I guess we'll leave it there.
Good for me.
Good for me. Thanks for having me.
Jeff, thank you for joining, and thank you all for listening. Open Work is, of course, a production of Collective Horology. You can find us online at collectivehorology.com. We've got some watches from Geneva Watch Days there, too. And get in touch with your questions, your feedback, or your suggestions. We love those. And to do that, just email podcast@collectivehorology.com.